Well, I've got no love for Steve Schmidt, who has essentially become a pundit on MSNBC, a longtime Republican, and also an advisor to John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign. I have to say, I did appreciate the multiple Twitter threads that he engaged in, where he was specifically calling out the brattiness and bad behavior of Meghan McCain. Now, let's get into some of these threads, and Tulsi Gabbard makes an appearance. This is a little bit of a surprise. We'll get to that as well. But this all kind of started when news broke that Meghan McCain failed to sell more than 244 copies of her latest book. So less than 300 copies of her latest book. And so Steve Schmidt writes on Twitter, I can explain this. When I kicked Meghan McCain off of the 2008 McCain plane because of her outrageous behavior, I talked to her mom and explained what was happening and why. Cindy got weepy and said, quote, I just want to say I raised two good sons. I said, everyone knows you did. Man. So basically he's alleging that Meghan McCain's mom acknowledged during this conversation that her daughter sucks, which he gets into more detail. Let's give you that. He says, everyone who has ever worked with Meghan McCain, from ABC, The View, Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and 1,000 others, have seen the unfiltered version of what the whole of America has seen. That is why in a nation of 330 million people, 247 have bought the book. Nothing new to learn. So he might be overestimating there. I think it's only like 244, but either way, less than 300 books have been sold. Now, then he goes off on Meghan McCain after she liked a tweet that called him a pedophile. So he does a quote tweet and says, after 14 years of abuse and attacks, today is the day I have decided to respond. I am happy to keep the story going after this thread. It only gets better. And that's the tweet that he was referring to, in which Meghan decided to like. And then he goes on to describe Meghan's behavior on the campaign trail. She was only 23 at the time when she had launched her blog about the campaign that her father had engaged in. And so here's what he says about that. I was the first adult that Meghan McCain ever encountered that she heard the word no from. I told her she was unimportant and that the presidential election wasn't about her. I left her on the tarmac when she didn't make the plane because, as I explained to her, the 5,000 people who were waiting to see her father speak and took the time to do it deserved to have him show up on time. That was the way John McCain saw it. He was appalled by Meghan McCain's conduct on the campaign trail, appalled and embarrassed. The tantrums were beyond anything I'd ever witnessed from any other human being. They were epic meltdowns that would test the range of Meryl Streep, Kate Winslet, Jodie Foster, and Anne Hathaway on their best days, raging, screaming, crying at the staff, at the makeup people, at Secret Service. Without any doubt, it was the most rotten, entitled, spoiled, cruel, mean, and bullying behavior I've ever witnessed. It was my job to confront it, and I did. I talked to 24-year-old Meghan McCain the way an adult should have talked to Trump kids. I talked to her the way a retired USMC would. I'm guessing he ends that tweet with. But anyway, listen, while I have my issues with Steve Schmidt, I can put that aside for 1 second and say that from my personal experience, having to work with her on a show called Take Part Live when I was like a fill-in host, it's all true. She's pretty awful to people around her. She was awful to producers. One particular story that stood out to me was when a producer had worked on a segment regarding Obama's drone strikes. This is during the Obama administration. And everything was like spoon-fed to her because she didn't want to do the work. And so as she's getting her makeup done, I was there getting my makeup done as well. Producer walks in with the talking points, with this prepared segment ready to go. It's about the drone strikes. Meghan McCain looked at it and was like, so boring. It's so boring. I don't want to read about this, so boring. And so wasn't interested in consequential foreign policy that was being implemented by Obama. And yet she had a position working as a political news show host, which blew my mind.
Yeah, so I want to complete that tweet that you were reading because it's relevant. And then I got my thoughts on this. He said, I talked to her the way a retired USMC 4-star general failed to do in the White House with Ivanka, Jared, and Jr. They're all the same people. I told her that she was unimportant and that everything around her had nothing to do with her. I told her she was privileged, lucky, and should be grateful. She told me, and anyone else who would listen in response, do you know who the F my dad is? It was a miserable anthem of the total chaos that was the McCain campaign. It never stopped until one day when I said enough. Now, I partly wanted to read that to you because that rings so true, whether it's the family members of elite Republicans or elite Democrats. They grow up with such overwhelming entitlement. And they think when you're a regular person, like, how dare you even talk to me or question me? And there's one thing that I really disagree with Steve Schmidt on about this. He keeps protecting John McCain and Cindy McCain, the parents. I got kids. Look, parenting is super hard. But when your kid throws a tantrum, and especially if they're mean to someone else, and you were gonna go somewhere, you stay home. You don't reward that behavior. You say, well, you want a McDonald's, now I'm not gonna get you McDonald's, okay? Whatever you need to do to teach your kids to be decent people. And look, I know it's super tough and sometimes it doesn't work and people are human and we're all weak and we've got our frailties, etc. But it's obvious that the McCains spoiled the living crap out of Meghan, never challenged her, and all she, my dad, yeah. I mean, we've seen it 1,000 times. So no, and by the way, John McCain's campaign was an absolute mess. You know whose fault that is? John McCain. So I get it, Meghan was the worst of the worst, and you're still trying to protect the ghost of John McCain. But, and I know in Washington, he's an angel and no one is allowed to criticize him. He was a war hawk, loved war, got tons of people killed for no reason, and was deeply incompetent. Couldn't run his own campaign, picked Sarah Palin, could never, apparently according to Steve Schmidt, he was glad that Steve Schmidt did the parenting for him, couldn't control his daughter and didn't want to. So no, Steve, John McCain was a total mess, and I'm not buying your corporate, oh yeah, but we love war, so we love John McCain nonsense.
Now, as you rightly mentioned, John McCain was in fact a war hawk, and Meghan McCain was on board for all of it. Totally admired her father, didn't seem to really have a mind of her own when it came to foreign policy, was very hawkish. And I remember that through personal conversations. I remember that through the comments that she made in the press about various foreign policy decisions. Did not think that drone strikes that were taking out innocent civilians were a big deal. And I give you that context to now go to an Instagram post by Tulsi Gabbard. Let's take a look at this. So in the photo, she's giving Meghan McCain a big hug, and the caption says this: Meghan McCain should be honored that a warmongering slimeball like Steve Schmidt is attacking her. Okay, let's pause. What about the woman that you're hugging who is totally down for the US foreign policy that you purport to be against? Does that matter at all? Does that matter at all, Tulsi?
Her beloved dad that she talks about in every sentence, to borrow a phrase from Joe Biden, everything is noun, verb, my daddy, right? With Meghan McCain. He was literally the biggest hawk of my life. There wasn't a war he didn't want to make out with. He's by the end, he was proposing absurd wars with like, wait, did you run out of countries for us to bomb and attack? And now Tulsi Gabbard thinks that that's the anti-war family? I mean, she's a hilarious joke of a person. The reason she's doing that with Meghan McCain is like, oh, fame, right wing, money, oh. She has no morals at all.
I mean, she's got no value. Like, that's the thing that stands out to me about her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the one who like postured as like the strongest anti-intervention, anti-imperialist candidate actually ends up to kind of love the very wars that she was speaking out against. I mean, she didn't agree with the Iran nuclear deal, which was actually one of Obama's good accomplishments, right? I mean, you got a deal with all sorts of checks baked in to ensure that Iran isn't developing nuclear weapons. Tulsi Gabbard weirdly wasn't in favor of that. She did a tour in Africa recently, came back and was like, yeah, I'm putting on my military uniform, doing my tour in Africa. I'm really worried about those radical Islamic extremists. No, she loves the wars. I mean, she's got no real identity. She's got no values other than the cult that she's part of. And yeah, she's part of a cult, literally. Read about it. That's who she is. She's a freak. Anyway, but going back to Meghan McCain and her father, just as another piece of evidence of how insanely shameless she is. Recently posted this picture on Instagram. She's holding her daughter, very cute. In the background, you see John McCain's, where he was buried.
She's a joke, man.
She put her book on his gravesite. Like,
oh my God. Well, no live people are buying it, to be fair. So
shameless.
No, I mean, she's using her dad's gravesite. Like when he was alive, all she would ever say is, my dad, my dad, my dad. Here's the picture. Here's my dad, here's my dad, here's my dad, right? He's dead and she's still like, here's my dad in the ground. He's the only one who bought my book. It's unreal. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.